Toyota has finally revealed a new electric car for the American market. Was it worth the wait? Let's take a first look. Jared here with CarBuzz.com, and today we are getting a first look at the all-new Toyota bZ4X. This is a hugely important car for the Toyota brand because it is the first fully electric vehicle they've sold since the RAV4 EV went out of production back in 2014. Now, the RAV4 EV was just a California-only compliance car. This is going to be for the entirety of the United States, and it is entering a market that is vastly dominated by one automaker, that being Tesla. Toyota really took its time with the bZ4X, and today we are going to find out whether it was worth the wait or if Toyota was a little bit too late to the electric car market. Before we start delving into the bZ4X, you might be wondering what that name even means. So you've got the BZ part, which stands for Beyond Zero. That is what Toyota is going to be referring to all of its battery electric vehicles that have zero emissions from now on. Now, the 4X part, I'm a little bit less certain on because you can get the bZ4X with all-wheel drive. You can also get it as front-wheel drive, and Subaru will offer its own version of this car called the Solterra. I think that's just a much better name because it doesn't sound like a fax machine. Now, the frontal area is obviously a lot different because you don't need a massive grille to cool an internal combustion engine. But aside from this big frontal area, the bZ4X doesn't look that much different from, say, a conventional RAV4. Aside from this sort of weird painted body cladding around the side, I think it looks like a pretty average Toyota. Now, you might be wondering how the bZ4 stacks up against Toyota's gas-powered RAV4, and it's roughly the same size at 184.6 inches long. It's about 3 or 4 inches longer than the RAV4. It's just a little bit lower than the RAV4, and it's exactly the same width. Now, one area where the bZ4X completely diverges from the RAV4 that we all know and love is the wheelbase. The wheelbase on the bZ4X is about 6 whopping inches longer than the RAV4, and that's probably going to pay dividends when we check out the interior. Now, before we check out that interior, let's finish up the exterior by looking at the rear end, where I think the styling back here is the biggest risk Toyota take with the bZ4X, and I think it definitely paid off. It doesn't really come across in pictures, but we have this really raked roofline that slants down, almost like something like a BMW X6, if you can believe that. You've got this little spoiler piece up here with like another spoiler down here. Kind of interesting, different from what Toyota normally does with its crossovers, that's for sure. And then these taillights look very futuristic. They wrap across the entirety of the rear end, and I sort of like how they have these lines dividing them up with this black cladding that kind of finishes off that black cladding look. We have more black cladding down here as well. This stuff being plastic, not the painted stuff that we saw up on the front and over on the sides. Overall, I'd say Toyota did a really nice job of making the bZ4X look just like the concept that we saw last year. In fact, I can barely tell this car apart from the concept. Before we hop inside, we got to go over some important details about the bZ4X, like the drivetrain, since this is new territory for Toyota. There are 2 battery packs available, and they aren't very different in size. The first one is 71.4 kilowatt hours, while the other one is 72.8 kilowatt hours. See what I mean? Not that big of a size difference like some other EVs. The smaller battery goes for the front-wheel drive model, which produces 201 horsepower. It's exactly the same as Volkswagen's ID.4, although that vehicle is rear-wheel drive. If you go for the all-wheel drive model, that front motor actually goes down in power to just 107 horsepower, but you also get a second motor at the back, which combines with the front one to produce 215 miles per hour. We'll have to wait to get some official Toyota performance figures to determine which is quicker, but I'm a little bit disappointed that the all-wheel drive model doesn't see a bigger power jump like we've seen in some other electric vehicles. In terms of range, we know the front-wheel drive bZ4X will go around 250 miles on a charge, but we still don't know how far the all-wheel drive version will go. As we hop into the cabin of the bZ4X, I want to remind you all to like and subscribe to the CarBuzz YouTube channel and ring that notification bell to be alerted of our latest videos. If you want to read more about the Toyota bZ4X, be sure to check out carbuzz.com. Now back to the video. So this interior is a little bit more futuristic than we've come to expect from Toyota, except for maybe the Prius, because that's always had a very funky cabin of its own. The centerpiece is this very large, very clear 12.3-inch touchscreen display that we've seen on a few other models like the Lexus NX and the Toyota Tundra. I think the software is great. It's very easy to use, and we've got some really cool technology like wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, as well as over-the-air updates. This is going to be great when it arrives on the market next year. Now, unlike a Prius or a Tesla Model 3, you do get a secondary screen up here that handles your speedometer and other important information. I'm happy that's right in front of the driver and positioned very up high rather than being in the center of the car. And joy of joys, the bZ4X has a little bit different than we've seen from other Toyota models, but a regular steering wheel. In some other markets, Toyota is actually going to ship the bZ4X with a yoke, like how Tesla has, but I'm very thankful that the US market is going to have a conventional wheel. The rest of the cabin seems pretty well laid out and decently premium to me. We've got some cup holders down here. You have this little binnacle right here that houses a wireless charger here on this top trim. We've got this weird rotating shifter that's kind of interesting. The only thing that I'm not a huge fan of here, we do have physical controls for our climate here that are very easy to use, but we do have these touch capacitive buttons, just like the Venza. I'm not a huge fan of these. I wish Toyota would have just went with some conventional buttons. As for the materials, we do have leather here on this limited model, although I think you can get partial cloth seats one trim down, and I really love this sort of cloth material here on the dash. That is a very cool touch. Now, we still don't know the official interior measurements, but sitting back here, I feel like I have a lot more space than I'm going to get in the Toyota RAV4. That's because I have this very nice flat load floor because, of course, there's no transmission tunnel. I've also got heated seats, 2 USB ports back here, my own climate controls, which is quite nice. And on this limited, guys, we also have a sunroof that's gonna open up independently of the one in the front. That's pretty cool. Now, just like the back seat, I'm kind of winging it here when it comes to the cargo space because Toyota did not quote any official figures back here. I can simply tell you how it looks to me. It looks pretty spacious. I'm not sure if this sloped roofline is going to cut into the cargo space a little bit, at least compared to something like a RAV4 or maybe even a Venza, but I think the space back here is fine. You get a little bit underneath here to store your charger. That's important on an electric car, and because the bZ4 is a pretty conventional SUV inside, you can fold the seats 60/40 style to get even more space for larger items. So that was the new Toyota bZ4X. Unfortunately, we did not have a chance to drive it because it is still a pre-production vehicle. Toyota should sell this vehicle starting in the spring of 2022, so you can look forward to a first drive video from us around then where we can take the bZ4X out on the road. But until then, I'll see you next time. We really hope you've enjoyed this first look of the Toyota bZ4X. For more videos like it, be sure to check out our channel, leave a like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell to be alerted of all of our latest videos. I'll see you next time.